My name is T. James Reagan, and this is the T. James Reagan podcast, recorded in Newark, New Jersey. The last podcast I released was a 3.5-hour-long deep dive into Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis. That film starred, among other people, post-Empire legend Shia LaBeouf. I have a podcast on Didion and Babbitts that I've been recording, but it's over 40,000 words long at this point, and even I'm boring myself when I narrate it, so I've decided to return to the filmography of Shia LaBeouf for this current episode, as he's released a new film with one of our finest writers and Americans, David Mamet. What follows is an essay that no one would publish. Every person I sent it to either didn't respond or found it distasteful. Associating oneself with David Mamet and Shia LaBeouf scares people. I lack that fear. So, here's the essay. If you like my writing, try one of my novels. They're available on Amazon. Right now there's a special going on for my novel Act Like Me, where it's 99 cents. Act Like Me is a satire about Hollywood and influencers and not being able to trust your own intuition. Think of it like if Roman Polanski directed MTV's The Hills. All right, let's get into it. What follows are my post-Empire notes on David Mamet and Shia LaBeouf's Henry Johnson. Anytime you mention their name, make sure you renounce them. If someone catches you enjoying their work, make sure they know you are disgusted by the person who created it. You, after all, are a good person. And this other person, a creative you've never met, is, as their reputation confirms, a bad person. The problem is, they're also undeniably talented. You are a left-wing, terminally online ally who is outraged at David Mamet's conservatism in support of Israel. You are a right-wing, terminally online patriot who is outraged that Shia LaBeouf used his "He Will Not Divide Us" campaign to show he's a good little soldier so he could get those blockbuster paychecks again. You will not support the work of this bad person on ideological and moral grounds. You will make it known that you don't support them. You will threaten to boycott those who do support them. You will either demand a POC gets an opportunity that Mamet would get, or you'll demand that Gina Carano gets the rehabilitation that Shia LaBeouf is potentially being offered. This is how you behave because you're such a good person. So, how do the bad people behave? The bad people had to get creative, and unfortunately for you, getting creative is why they're famous. They meet, they connect, they find a way to work. And, as much as you hate yourself for doing so, you will watch. No matter how much the terminally online conservative whines about Shia LaBeouf, and no matter how much the terminally online leftist whines about David Mamet, both of these men are fluent in a necessary, simple response to the list of grievances leveled against them. That response? Fuck you. Shia LaBeouf has made a lot of money. I don't know the current status of his bank account, but at one point, he had fuck you money. And he would say fuck you to people. Now, his baby mama's a star, so he might still have fuck you money, even when he's shooting indies. David Mamet has written a lot of iconic dialogue. The ABC scene from Glengarry Glen Ross is now sewn into pop culture, and that scene contains fuck you, that's my name. So, when David Mamet wants to create something new, and when Shia LaBeouf wants to create something new, and your little terminally online brain asks, do you think that this industry will support something with those names on the poster? Shia and David respond, fuck you, that's my name. There's a crucibilian echo to it. All they have is their names, and those names will get people's attention. It's why you clicked on this essay. It certainly wasn't for my name. I know I have no readers. I know I sell no novels. I get the monthly reports that tell me so. You are reading this or listening to this because Shia LaBeouf and David Mamet, that alone is proof that they cannot be stopped. And because they cannot be stopped, Henry Johnson exists. You did everything you could to make sure it didn't, but it does. And even worse, you're curious about it. To watch the film, you need to go to henryjohnson.com and pay $10 for a week-long rental. If the you that I spoke of at the start of this essay accurately reflects you, I dislike you. I'm sure I've made that much clear by the tone of the writing and my narration so far. Regardless, I will give you what you want. I will tell you what happens in David Mamet's and Shia LaBeouf's Henry Johnson, so you don't have to give your money to bad people. Henry Johnson began as a play directed by Marja Lewis Ryan. It was performed in the fall of 2023. Their September run had been extended through October 7th at the Electric Lodge in Venice, California. Variety had described the play as being dusted off as a favor to the venue. I'm not sure I believe that origin story, but I think it was said because Henry Johnson is a play about favors. It's entirely possible that David was being cute and someone took it at face value. Many such cases. Initially, critics weren't invited to the play. If you want to know why, you can choose to punish yourself by reading Charles McNulty be a pathetic crybaby about David Mamet in the LA Times. To the surprise of no one, when you click on the link to go to the LA Times page, you'll see Charles's name, and next to Charles's name will be a link to a Blue Sky account. In McNulty's final paragraph, he does bow to the king, though, after being conditioned by Mamet to do so. The reason that Charles was able to see the play was because of an email that Shia sent, which read, "3 weeks into a successful run of Henry Johnson, and we've yet to receive a review, analysis, or any illuminating interpretation of our work, positive or negative, outside of a few tweets and word of mouth. I know Mamet prefers this. Personally, I find dramaturgical criticism instructive and generative. I think it's good for the sport, and I would be pleased as punch if you would join me in attending this play on one of the days. This is why I talk about Shia so much. It's good for the sport." It makes sense. The star likes the spotlight. That's not surprising. He was doing good work, and he had been waiting for a chance to be seen as a theater actor, so I don't begrudge him for sending this email. Any Shia fan who was on Vimeo back in 2013 remembers when Shia, after leaving the play Orphans over creative differences, posted what might be his audition for the role. In the video, LaBeouf is off-book and brilliant. We watch him from what most likely is a MacBook webcam. It was thrilling to see, and we had the best seat in the house for a performance that never made the stage due to a damaged coward of a human being. Of course, we're speaking of Alec Baldwin. Alec also happened to be Shia's 1 degree of separation from Mamet, until a mutual friend introduced the two men. On Bobby Lee and Andrew Santino's Bad Friends podcast, Shia explains, "I met Dave through fan letter. I've been trying to get to Dave for 10 years. When Dave tells a story of them having a mutual friend, who eventually sold both of them out, Mamet was invited to sit down at the table with that friend and Shia. He recounts, he said, 'Shia LaBeouf, I so admire,' but Shia interrupted and told him, 'That's not necessary.' Dave found this shocking. He saw what a wonderful man Shia was in a second. But we know you can't see into someone during your first interaction with them. We know that Shia has been placed at the table with legends in the past, and he's charmed them. David knows this as well, because he wrote an entire play about it. It's not the only thing Henry Johnson is about, though. Here's a Wikipedia summary. Henry Johnson, Evan Joniket, a reserved and seemingly ordinary man, finds his sense of self tested when he crosses paths with Gene, Shia LaBeouf, a dominant and enigmatic figure who takes a keen interest in him. What begins as mentorship soon blurs into psychological manipulation, with Jean drawing Henry into a web of ambiguous motives and shifting power dynamics. I don't like that summary. I prefer the summary that was posted with the trailer for the film. It reads, Henry Johnson is a drama that follows the title character as he navigates his search for a moral center after an act of compassion upends his life. Looking to authority figures he encounters along the way, Henry's journey leads him down a road of manipulation and ethical uncertainty. That is the trailer summary, and that is why you won't be watching the trailer. I don't want you to watch the trailer because the trailer spoils a fantastic moment. It spoils one of David's magic tricks. And you'll say, but Tommy, by the very nature of this essay, you're spoiling the film. And to that, I say, yes, but I'm not going to let the trailer spoil my fun. I'm going to make that crucial reveal in my essay, and it's going to be a good time. It's going to keep you listening, and most of these podcasts end up 3 hours long, so need all the help I can get. But this also begs the fundamental question, can you spoil one of David Mamet's works? For me, the entire Mamet experience is hearing Mamet speak being machine-gunned out like modern Shakespeare. Trying to spoil Mamet is like trying to spoil James Ellroy. We know the Black Dahlia is dead even before we open the book, but we still open it because the pleasure is in reading Ellroy write about it. He, like Mamet, is unspoilable. I didn't see nor did I read the play Henry Johnson, so I can't give you any information about the stage production beyond what I've already stated. I can, however, give you far too much information about the film, which, of note, is David's first Mamet joint in 12 years, the last being 2013's Phil Spector, a movie that he had to extract Helen Mirren out of her vacation for just to have a female lead when the cameras started rolling. To start, I'll give you a character guide, because there are only 4 characters, so it won't take up the word limit that originally was this essay that I submitted to multiple people that told me it was way too long, and even if it was shorter, it was still gross. Our main character is Henry Johnson, played by Evan Jonigkeit. The conversational partner for our main character in the first act is Mr. Barnes, played by Chris Bauer. The conversational partner for our main character in the second and third acts is Jean, played by Shia LaBeouf. The conversational partner for our main character in the fourth and final act is Jerry, played by Dominic Hoffman. These 4 characters talk in rooms. The rooms they talk in are a mahogany office, a cinder block cell, and a prison library. There's a glimpse of a therapist's office, but no words are exchanged there. Due to the scale of this production, this is not a film for the big screen. It's a film to watch at home. David and company knew this, which is why they made the choice to host it on henryjohnsonmovie.com. As David so kindly put it, everyone has the unalienable right to buy my products. Beyond this democratization, there was a valid precedent for this move. Louis C.K. changed the way comedy specials were streamed by utilizing his massive mailing list to directly let his fans know that his stand-up special was uploaded to his site for a reasonable price. He did this again with his TV show, Horace and Pete. David got the number for Louis' website guy since, among other things, David was courting Louis to play Jack Ruby in his film about the JFK assassination. The film was also set to star Shia as Oswald, but this film will never happen, as Mamet was replaced by Barry Levinson as the director, a matter that has now gone to the courts. As one script languishes in the con man hell that is film financing, another shines as an indie film that was reportedly completed in a mere 5 days. Do I believe that time frame for the film? On one hand, the actors had already drilled this material so many times that it was just another performance. But on the other hand, the film's quality doesn't support the idea that this was some point-and-shoot endeavor. Nothing was locked in. The film may be stagey by modern conventions, but it doesn't feel stagnant because there's at least one character, always moving. And when they're not, they're framed in such a way that is visually appealing. There's a shot of Evan and Shia sitting on a bed, framed in profile, that looks appealing in a way that one wouldn't expect from a director who is basically like, I'll show up and shoot the actors saying their lines. Showing up. That's what I was worried about when this collaboration was announced. After the Orphans drama, my biggest fear was that Shia would repeat the past, leaving me like Kevin Garnett in Uncut Gems asking, why you show me something if I can't have it? Even I, ever the Shia believer, was skeptical, but only because he had conned me in the past. 10 years ago, I tried to get a piece like this published during Shia's HowardCantor.com plagiarism scandal. My piece explained that, as a post-Empire writer, I was attuned to what Shia was attempting to do in ways that regular culture critics weren't. I shopped the piece around to every outlet, and they all passed. I framed labeouf as the star of post-Empire America, while the feedback I got from editors was that Shia would no longer be a star. And these editors wielded that power. They were going to make the decision, they had made the decision, and the decision seemed uniform. I chose to read the piece on my podcast. As you can see, history repeats itself, as I am now narrating the next piece I wrote about him. It didn't stop there, though. During the pandemic, I wrote a play called #Let's Play, since Mia Goff, Shia's partner, had expressed a desire to perform on stage with him. The play was sent to Slauson Rec, Shia's acting collective, and they were permitted to perform it free of charge, but it never made the stage. They just responded with a thank you. Now, this is another piece about Shia LaBeouf, further tying myself to him, when it would be so much easier to write about someone like Mia Goth's Pearl co-star, David Cornsweet. But the film he's currently starring in holds no appeal for me. Outside of Pearl, David holds no appeal to me as a human being. Maybe if he started an adaptation of a Fitzgerald short story, I could get it up for him, but the fact that I want to write about Shia is because his story is interesting to me. His story is probably more interesting than half the movies he's starred in. So, the moment I paid for my rental of Henry Johnson, Shia got my $10. He conned me again. Or did he? Maybe it was an even transaction, and I just paid him rent for his time. I made popcorn, cracked open a PBR, and then hit play, ready to find out if I'm an eternal mark for this guy. During the opening credit title cards, the dialogue begins too low in the mix. I leaned in and stayed that way. The opening credits end, then the conversation I couldn't hear is interrupted as our titular character, Henry Johnson, steps into a mahogany office. Henry is played by Evan Jonigkeit, a 42-year-old theater veteran. He has a beard and salt and pepper hair. He's in a suit that, if your stream wasn't good enough, might actually blend in with the wood grain of the walls. And he's wearing a pair of glasses that I swore I've seen on Mamet in the past. The character who is having the conversation that played during the title cards is Chris Bauer's Mr. Barnes, a man who appears to be in his late 50s and possesses a gravelly, imposing voice that previously recited Mamet speak on stage in The Penitent. The conversation we weren't supposed to pay attention to ends, and the conversation we must pay attention to begins between Henry and Mr. Barnes. A letter is mentioned. A friend is mentioned. A criminal sentence handed down to said friend is mentioned, and that sentence is manslaughter. A girl is mentioned. A trimester is mentioned. A question regarding the importance of which trimester is asked and answered. All of this happens within the first 4 minutes of the film. We come to understand that this is a conversation about an abortion. That is how Mamet chose to open his play. And then, his first film in the theaters in 18 years. And his first Mamet joint since 2013. Those hiatuses were not for lack of trying, and it was complicated due to David publishing nonfiction books like the excellent yet maligned by good people, Recessional, The Death of Free Speech and the Cost of a Free Lunch. When this abortion topic was brought up, I felt an instant frustration. I was like, come on, man, just play their stupid fucking game. Every fucking thing you write is about the games we play. Just play their game. Once. This frustration instantly fades because the Mamet speak travels in its usual up-tempo, fast, over itself, and unrelenting pace. One doesn't have the time to have a dialogue with the creator when the creator's dialogue is rushing forward at a perfect pace. This is not a movie you watch on your phone. I believe that is why the dialogue during the title cards is pretty much unintelligible. I think it was a trick to get you to put your phone down, then pick up the remote. And so I couldn't have a dialogue with David while the dialogue was blazing forward. And I knew I couldn't stop David from discussing abortion, so I let him continue. And it was quickly revealed that this isn't just some abortion, it's an abortion of remarkable circumstance. As this conversation happens, Bauer completely controls the scene, with Evan responding in squeaky, simple statements, carrying little, if any, power. Seeing and hearing this for the first time, one may worry about Jonakite's ability to keep up. You most certainly would worry about it. The moment you found out that on Jonakite's Wikipedia, his wife's name is Blue, and you don't even need to click on her name to find out why that name is Blue, you will deeply worry about it. You will recontextualize him as a performer. That name on Wikipedia is Blue because Evan's wife's name is Zosha Mamet. Zosha is David's daughter. Since you had to assert how you'll never support Shia and could never pay to see David's work, it's safe to assume that you also hold animosity toward Nepo babies. This will then lead you into the cascading game of Nepo dominoes. You'll say that David Mamet's daughter gets to be a main character in the cast of Lena Dunham's Girls because she's David Mamet's daughter. Then David Mamet's daughter marries an actor, and now this actor has access to one of the greatest playwrights to ever live. And due to this access, he can encourage said playwright to pull a play out of the drawer and get back at it. And wouldn't you know it, there's a part, the lead of the play, that is perfectly suited for the husband of David Mamet's daughter. David Mamet's daughter's husband offers his services to his father-in-law, and as a result, he's cast in the play. But he needs the film industry to see the play so he contrives a plan to get his father-in-law to convert the play into a movie. Now he's a leading man. And by achieving this, he's also a con man. This is how you view things? Because it's an easy framework. I didn't, and don't, think any of those things. Because what you find watching Henry Johnson is that Evan is playing Henry as a guy who can't keep up, and that's great character work. Mamet absolutely needs his titular character to be a step behind. The play doesn't work without it. This is something that reveals itself as the film progresses, but for now, the verbal tennis continues. We have to put the case together ourselves, each line feeding us new information as we assemble it into a mosaic. As the case becomes clear, it also feels plausible. This instinct is not jaded. It's true. It is possible. This case that they discuss was the seed of the idea for Henry Johnson. How this idea came to David is detailed in Jay Moore's interesting, if not a little fawning, Moore's Stories interview, where David explains, I was talking to a guy I know, and I said, I thought we were going to have lunch this week, but you got busy. He said, yeah, I had to go up to Tehachapi to see a friend of mine. He's in prison. I said, oh, that's interesting. Who is it? Do you want to tell me? He said, yeah, a guy I know from college. He got jammed up. David said, oh, how'd he get jammed up? And the friend responded, well, he was seeing this girl, blah, 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 and she got pregnant. And he wanted her to abort the baby. She said, I'm not going to abort the baby. "What are you talking about? I'm going to keep the baby." He said, "No, it would really inconvenience me." I think he was having an affair with her. "If you had the baby, I'd really like you to abort that baby." She said, "Thank you, I don't want to." He said, "Well, I'll pay you, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "I really don't want to." David then provides the brutal details. So they get together, one last fling, and while he's having sex with her, he induces into her body an abortifacient, and she aborts the baby. This is precisely how the film plays out, with an additional question regarding if what this man did qualifies as rape. The question is posed because the criminal put the abortifacient on his dick, then administered it via penetration. What further complicated this matter was that David's friend, an individual who David knows to be a good man, stated that once his criminal pal got out of jail, he was going to help him. And just as David's friend designed to help a convict get their life back on track, Henry too endeavors to help his friend in the film. This charismatic criminal friend is never seen on screen, so we rely on his friend Henry Johnson to describe this man. Henry does this by recounting his college days with this friend-turned-inmate. Mr. Barnes, probing the undertones of this collegiate nostalgia, brings up the question of homosexual attraction between one or both of them. But this line of questioning is quickly rerouted to a discussion of this criminal friend's power over women. We're presented with a Don Juan archetype, and Henry, as the lesser man, has a choice of either resenting him or admiring him. Henry admired him, but it was not a choice. This Don Juan friend offered to do Henry a favor. With two girls vying for his attention, the friend asked Henry if he would like one of them. Henry didn't take him up on the offer and notes, "But he didn't shame me." To which Mr. Barnes responds, "You did that for him." Knowing Shia LaBeouf, this charismatic friend tease feels like the perfect setup for the exact type of character we'd expect Shia to play. Everything is aligned with the charismatic playboy behavior that we know of Shia LaBeouf. Sure, he's more of a monogamist than the cruising the bar for a bed to sleep in nature of Henry's friend, but the differences are few. Hearing this story, building up a character we cannot see but can identify, we are ready for the camera to smash cut to LaBeouf, but instead, we're totally ambushed by how we meet Shia's character and who Shia is playing. In the first of 3 sledgehammers that Mamet wields then swings in this film, a full 20 minutes into the movie, Mamet has Mr. Barnes question who paid for the criminal friend's high-priced lawyer. The question is one Mr. Barnes already knows the answer to, because, he reveals, he contacted the Bar Association. Henry asks why he did that, and Mr. Barnes responds, "To explain the absence in our books of $300,000. Now, we understand that Henry Johnson fell under the influence of this charming man to such a degree that it rendered him a criminal as well. This is also why I told you not to watch the trailer. In the trailer, you will see Henry Johnson in a cinderblock cell wearing a yellow prison jumpsuit, just as we see him as Act 2 begins. To know that Henry ends up in a prison cell is to remove the head from Mamet's sledgehammer. Act 2, we're still with Henry, but gone is the beard and his glasses are in a bag, not on his face. As Henry walks to the mirror to place down his personal items, Shia appears at the door of the cell. There are no bars on this cell, which might be a metaphor, or it might have just been easier to shoot on a shoestring budget. Immediately, there's a question of how this image was permitted to ever exist. How did we end up with a Shia LaBeouf at the door of a jail cell in a yellow prison jumpsuit at a time in his career when any other actor would be rehabbing their image? It made sense to everyone what was happening when we saw Shia in Padre Pio's robes. That was the image he needed to project. I bet his handlers were happy. All for Shia to erase it, appearing exactly as he's being portrayed in the media when there was a trial on the docket last September. The case has been settled, but the matter has not. I can imagine the call Shia made to his reps. Clear my schedule, I'm about to do a play. Sure, fine, who's writing it? Mamet. Fuck, okay, what's the play about? The inciting incident is about an incredibly charismatic man who commits rape and manslaughter. Please don't tell me that's you. It's not. That's a relief. Who do you play? I play an incarcerated man who exploits the vulnerable with his uncanny powers of manipulation. Shoot me in the head. As Henry turns to face Shia, a train can be heard in the sound design, but there's a question of if the characters can hear it as well, or if this holds meaning in that these two men have their lives on the rails with no choice of where they're going, and they need to coexist in a small space until they reach a destination where they can step out into the world again. There's also a chance we're hearing this because the man who just entered the cell is a freight train, and when you're staring down a freight train, you only have one way to save yourself. Get the fuck out of the way. In the first interaction these cellmates have when they come face to face, Shia is pointing at Henry's bed. Then Henry is sitting down like an obedient dog. The train keeps rolling, and Mamet, a master of tension, withholds Shia's words from us. We waited 26 minutes for this superstar. Here he is, and he's not saying a damn thing. When Shia does finally speak, we don't hear Shia. We hear Jean. Jean's first words are, "Many dream of a wise man who will set him straight." At least that's what I think he says. The slick-tongued devil that is Shia LaBeouf is replaced by a different devil. This one speaks low. This one mumbles. This devil knows that what he has to say holds value, so you're going to have to pay him back in your undivided attention to get it. Coincidentally, this delivery is also an extremely smart tactic for a film that will be watched in one's home. You do not pick up your phone when Jean speaks. Once again, like you did at the title cards, you pick up the remote, you turn up the volume, you lean forward. During Jean's introductory monologue, Mamet performs another magic trick. The audience learns that the friend of Henry Johnson, despite being the ideal role for LaBeouf to play, is someone else. We thought we had Shia's entire backstory when he appeared at the mouth of that cell, and now we have no fucking idea who this guy is. Why is he in this cell? We sense that he's dangerous, and to hear what he has to say, one must lean close, putting oneself in danger. The fantastic work of D.P. Singh Hao Yam gets us close as Shia delivers one of the best lines of the film. Here's the wisdom. Everything is as it seems. All the cards are on the deck, just depends on how you cut them. Then, Shia waits for the cut, as Mamet refuses to call it, holding on his shot. The evocative sound design crafted by Justin M. Davey makes sure this pause isn't silent. Crackling radios and shrieks of prisoners and electronic buzzing of access being granted all echo around us. Until Jean speaks again. Everyone comes in here worried about getting raped. In Act 1, our titular character debated on what qualifies as rape. In Act 2, he's now fearing that he will find out how it feels. One has to wonder if Mamet's play about Harvey Weinstein, Bitter Wheat, or even Oleana once contained these bits, or if it's just a fixation of David's. In what feels like a joke of a transition, from discussing rape to discussing Disney characters, Jean gives an empire view of those fairy tale princesses, and this is Mamet talking, not Shia. Being one of the most prominent figures of post-Empire himself, and being a product of the Disney machine, Shia would know that a post-Empire Snow White isn't white at all. And she doesn't get saved by a man. And she fails by every metric, except for the discourse metric, in which it's one of the most talked about films of 2025, causing its star to self-deport to England. Jean's princess monologue contains another delicious, classic Mamet line, delivered pitch perfectly by LaBeouf. And then the story ends happily ever after, which means you don't want to know. And as Shia is performing Mamet's brilliant monologue, He's going about his shared cell, tending to himself in his space. The space being limited, while the self seeming endless. When Gene lifts up his shirt to put on deodorant, Shia's creeper tattoos show. These are remnants from character work Shia did on behalf of another David Ayer, in a film called The Tax Collector. This is also the film that Shia is alleged to have shot dogs for to get into the mind state of a Cholo character. And that character, from introduction to brutal death, doesn't contain half the humanity that we get from LaBeouf in the first 4 minutes of his introduction as Gene. Yet, that ink is still on his skin, and it adds to his character. Every failure can be transformed into a win by a desperate man who refuses to relent. In another inspired piece of directing, we cut to a camera angle set exactly where one would place a security camera in a cell when it's time for our fourth and final character to be introduced, the 62-year-old Dominic Hoffman, who plays Jerry, a prison guard. Mamet fans will recognize Dominic from Mamet's last theatrically released joint, Red Belt. There are 17 years in between that film and this film, and neither man has lost a single step. Don't believe me? Pay your $10, then hit play. You might even be able to find it cheaper on Amazon now. It won't cost you much. Jerry arrives at the mouth of the cell with a book cart. Shia asks Jerry to get Henry a job in the library. Jerry takes a sheet of paper on which Shia has scrawled Henry's prisoner number. Then the guard asks, "Why should I do you a favor?" "I might do something for you one day," Shia responds. An economy is introduced to Henry. He stole money, and that got him in this cell. Now, with this new economy, he seems eager to find out how to embezzle from it as well. This economy works in the prison and out of the prison. This economy of favors is partly why this essay exists. When Henry Johnson was premiering, David Mamet did me a favor. While promoting this film, David took questions from his lessers. One of those lessers being me. During a Reddit AMA that I'll link to in the show notes, I asked the following question. "Hi David, I've never heard you talk about the Fatty Arbuckle picture you were putting together in detail. Did the project die with Farley? Does the Phil Spector picture feel like you got a similar story out of your system? If you were to do it now, who is your dream fatty?" David, doing me a favor, responded, "This woman named Andy Edmonds wrote this wonderful book about the Fatty Arbuckle story, which is, of course, he was a great star and he got accused of killing this woman, Virginia Rapp, at a big party in San Francisco. And he completely had nothing to do with it. He was tried once and acquitted. He was tried a second time and acquitted. It was kind of the first gasp of a pre-Me Too movement. And so he was driven out of Hollywood and became a director. And he adopted the name Will Be Good. And so Andy Edmonds wrote this wonderful book about Fatty Arbuckle, and I wrote and was going to direct the movie with Chris Farley, and he, what a shame, passed away, of course, and it would have been grand. Who would be my dream fatty now? Gosh, I don't want to body shame anybody. The thing about Fatty Arbuckle is when you go back and look at his movies, he wasn't actually fat. For the day, he might have been considered fat, but he was overweight, right? If you saw him on the street or saw him in the movie today, you'd never remark it. But there you are, DM. That was a favor. Now I'm returning it with this podcast, even though he'll never hear it. Considering the email he sent to those critics, Shia LaBeouf might hear it. So let's return to him. Gene sits down on his own bed, rolls a cigarette, then tells Henry, "There's 2 things you need to identify in yourself, right?" He lists the first. The impulse to believe. Because once you do that, then you're free to see what the other fella is trying to do. Next, the second. With that comes the wisdom of the others who want to be taken advantage of. Henry practically whimpers at this, then asks, "What can I do with them?" "Whatever you want," Gene responds. Mamet doesn't take his foot off the gas, and 2 masters intertwine as Shia declares, The illusion of law exists to celebrate a lie, that people are just, that there's some way to amalgamate them to make the lie true. Then, like a cat sneaking up on its prey, Shia's suddenly sitting next to Henry. On Henry's bed, he reaches for Henry, not to commence what Henry fears, but to grab his wrist and read the information on the medical bracelet he wears. From this, Shia learns that Henry is going to be going to counseling. Henry is desperate for guidance, and counseling seems like an offer of exactly that. So when Shia questions the process, Henry questions him why he should be suspicious of this resource, saying, "Perhaps she's here to help." Gene responds, "Yeah? Help who? To do what?" A smile creases across his face. He's realized something about Henry that he will exploit. When Gene suggests friendship between the two cellmates, Henry asks, "Why you?" "Hey," Gene responds. "Betty and Veronica. Same girl with a different wig. Perhaps you get to choose." Then he touches Henry again, but this is a brotherly slap on the chest, not the brutal attack he fears. Betty and Veronica is precisely what Henry is faced with. The man who put him in this cell was such a one-to-one description of Shia LaBeouf that it was actually a narrative twist when it was revealed that Gene is not that charismatic friend. Now here's Shia. Is Gene? Is he just Betty in a different wig? This question is how we'll end Act 2. Mamet doesn't lift his sledgehammer this time, but he lets us know that Henry can make a decision that will decide if it's raised again. Act 3 begins in a different office, that of the therapist that Henry spoke of in the cell, and Gene warned him about. The door is open and we're looking inside the office at a small table, 2 chairs, and a woman who is staring out the window. Henry walks into frame and takes a seat. Those glasses that were gone in the cell are placed back on his nose. The therapist sets a folder down in front of Henry. He opens it, sees his name, then sees 3 words: intent to kill. He raises the folder, then he reads because this is new to him. This is how Henry learns that his friend broke parole and they charged him with murder, and he named Henry as an accomplice. This is the reason why Henry will be going to trial as an accessory to murder. This is a change to his circumstances that will ripple outward for the rest of the film. Mamet cuts from that one file to walls covered in books, and it's enough reading material for 10 life sentences. Jerry, the guard who Gene asked the favor from, declares, "I'm locking up," as Gene approaches him, requesting another 10 minutes of library time with his cellmate and friend, Henry. He gets his time. At a table in the center of the library space, as the 2 men sit across from each other, Gene with a notebook, Henry with his prisoner file, Henry reveals that his high-priced lawyer has left his case. The reason? That new charge the therapist presented him with. Henry verbalizes what he's up against: first-degree homicide and murder with intent. These charges are because of his charismatic friend, and these charges are sticking to Henry because his charismatic friend shopped him. While on Mike Rowe's podcast, The Way I Heard It, Mamet declared, "A crush is an absence of information," and this is exactly what happened with Henry. Maybe he wasn't sexually interested in his charismatic friend, but he certainly did have what one could describe as a crush. It will make you do crazy things, a crush. And a crush can sustain longer and longer because everything you don't know about that person. Henry, in many ways, had no idea who his friend was. Now that he knows, that crush has disappeared. Or has it merely found a new vessel? Does Henry have a crush on Gene? Does Gene have a crush on Henry? Gene writes about Henry in his prison journal. In their shared cell, Henry put on Gene's sweatshirt, just as every girlfriend I've ever had has stolen a hoodie from me. When Henry asks for words of comfort regarding his legal situation, like a jealous girlfriend, Jean retorts, "Well, did your doctor friend comfort you?" And it turns out she did. On her day off, no less. Jean hears that this doctor friend violated the rules during this comforting. And he knows that jails are sustained by two things: walls and rules. Once one of those is broken, the potential for trouble multiplies. We're told that this isn't the first time this doctor friend has broken the rules. She's confided in Henry that there was an ivory-handled pistol that was given to the top student at her alma mater's graduation. The doctor's friend stole this pistol. The doctor hid it for her friend. Recounting this, the doctor explained that she knows how Henry feels, and she cried in sympathy over it. All of this is revealed as we finally get a true volley between Jean and Henry, Shia and Evan. During this scene, I saw Jonikit's pure ability, and I became even more impressed that he did not selfishly demand a commanding moment for himself. A limiter was placed on Jonikit by his own hand. Evan put all this together, and he has access to Mamet in a way that Shia would whisper things to Evan if he wanted them to be discussed with the captain. Yet there is never a scene where Henry breaks character so Jonikit can have a moment. The exciting volley ends when Jean gets all the information he needs. Now armed with a complete picture of a rapidly forming crush between inmate and patient, Jean verbally tumbles forward in his detailed analysis of the situation. What Jean's true analysis of this situation is will never be known. All we can go by are his words. "Why does anyone tell a secret?" Jean asks in another brilliant moment, then answers his question when Henry cannot. "To get one in return." Evan looks at Jean for more, for a directive, and then receives it. "Tell her you don't believe her." At first, Henry is incredulous about this, but Shia loops back to Henry's friend who got him into all this shit. He tells Henry that he would have gotten ahead of it and turned first. Sell out instead of being sold out. Once he has this established, he returns to the topic of the doctor. He says that she sees Henry as a good man, done wrong by the system. He is her chance to actually save someone. He could be the one she connects with, and since his innocence is alleged, perhaps she could help him in a way that she couldn't help the type of man who put him in this position he's in. They both want to use their kindness to effect change. She sees them as Betty and Veronica, same girl in a different wig, but she also sees Henry as Archie. At this point, LaBeouf explodes forward with what resonates like poetry but is delivered like a sermon. It's muscular in a way that I've never seen from Shia. I think my favorite moment of LaBeouf's career is his prayer in the tank in David Ayer's Fury. But for sustained power, I don't think that this scene has a true match in Shia's filmography. On Bobby Lee and Andrew Santino's Bad Friends podcast, LaBeouf and Mamet discuss that when someone makes a movie, they don't truly know if it works until there's a test screening. So before that, what a filmmaker is doing is theoretical. However, with a play, there can be tweaks after every performance. This means that Shia was able to sharpen and sharpen and sharpen his sword for this film. He's never had that chance before. This has to be one of the lowest budgets he's ever worked on, but take 1, take 2, take 3 happened months ago, before filming started. He's already found his place and his pace, but he doesn't seem comfortable in it. He's still pushing. Yet there's an exactness to this performance that I've never seen from LaBeouf before. The work is masterful, so much so that when the sound design picks back up, I knew Shia's run was about to come to an end, and just as desperate as I was for more, Jean too seemed desperate to continue. Jerry walks in, and Jean requests another 10 minutes. His work is not done, and if he was to stop now, it might break the spell. After more time is bought, Jean returns to Henry. And when he picks back up on his con, Eben plays Henry as an audience member. He barely moves. He watches a con flip the cards. Once Gene truly gets down to business, he pulls up a chair to his mark and brings up that there's a mutual attraction between the doctor friend and Henry. Then the con does what the con always does when the cards are on the table, and he makes the mark believe that he is the one getting something over on an unsuspecting rube. Gene plants it in Henry's head that if he's able to seduce this woman in a position of power and have her betray her better judgment, and he is found out for this behavior, then he needs to wonder what will go through the mind of the people on the parole board when he stands before them. They will recognize that Henry is a master manipulator, and they'll say to themselves, "Not me. I'm smarter than that." Then they'll shut down his chance at freedom. Gene returns to the other side of the table, and he tells Henry things that Henry knows but Gene couldn't possibly be aware of. When Henry questions how Gene knows these things, Gene responds, "Baby, I do this for a living." Remember when Henry first arrived and he was made wise to a new economy? When Gene asked for a favor to get his friend a job at the library? Gene himself might not have a library job, but in this moment, in this library, he is at work. We continue to dive deeper into the psyche of this doctor friend. Gene questions if Henry thinks his con is that this woman would grant him an early release. This con is quickly snuffed out by Gene as he reminds Henry that all of this woman's power comes from Henry being in the place he's exactly at. If she gets him out, she may never see him again. labeouf's performance is like the train that we heard when we first saw him. The locomotive is now moving at such a speed that Gene slightly becomes undone, spittle flying, his nose running into his mustache as that fucking sound design kicks back in, so we know that their time is up. Jerry returns. Gene pleads for a couple more minutes, and in an act of convenient mercy, an unseen guard, George, calls for Jerry's attention. Returning to Henry, Gene doesn't have time to butter up this punk anymore. It's time to turn him out. Gene's plan is put into motion by the command, "Tell her you don't believe her." This challenge, Henry declaring that she didn't hide that ivory-handled gun, is a challenge to her connection with Henry. "When you alter the rules, it's an invitation," Gene says. And we know that invitation is part of the courting process. In a flip of how Gene portrays Henry, the manipulative con is now called a little boy, while the doctor friend is referred to as an ice cream peddler. Once this dynamic is established, Gene suggests that the doctor friend must bring Henry a gift. But not just any gift. It must be proof. Proof of her story. It's Henry who suggests that this proof should be the gun, but Evan's line reading is like a gasp, like the idea occurred to him the moment it left his mouth and he couldn't believe what he was suggesting. "I don't know," Gene responds. Suddenly, the guy with all the answers isn't sure. He lets the silence hang. "She's not going to bring me a loaded gun," Henry declares, to which Gene instantly responds, "No, you would never ask her to do that. You would ask her to bring you a token at your meetings once a month." Now that they aren't talking about the gun anymore, Henry searches for what the token could be. Gene is more than happy to suggest that the token could be the bullet. But it doesn't stop there. There's a progression that they're going to follow. Once a month, the doctor friend brings a bullet. Then, finally, you tell her to bring the gun. Now that the idea is planted in Henry's mind, he has two last questions. What if she brings it? What do we do then? To which Gene responds, swinging another mamet sledgehammer. Whatever we want. This sledgehammer smashes us into Act 4, where we're still in the library, but the sound design is cacophonous. It's the stinging buzz of an alarm, it's police sirens, it's the noise of a struggle just outside. The cause of this chaos is instantly explained as our titular character walks into frame, holding an ivory-handled handgun. She brought the gun, then they did whatever they wanted. I'm not worried about how or why she brought the gun, just as I'm not worried about how or why Henry stole that money. The reason why I'm not worried is articulated well by David during an episode of The Way I Heard It with Mike Rowe. Mamet uses a framework of a joke where an armadillo, an ostrich, and a priest walk into a whorehouse as a setup. The teller paints this picture, and you just want to know what happens. You don't argue that the priest wouldn't be hanging out with animals like a Disney princess, and if he was, he wouldn't be taking them to the whorehouse. What happens when you get an intriguing setup is you park your rationality to find out what the fuck happens when a priest and his animal buddies enter an establishment of ill repute. To fact check what is not intended to be factual is to make oneself the joke. Why and how this doctor friend brought the gun is unimportant now that we see Henry moving through the library with it in his hand. After pulling a sign off the wall, Henry adds this to his barricade at the door leading out to the halls of the prison. Henry finally has a job in the library, and it's not just to keep the guards out, but also watch the guard that he's taken hostage. Poor Jerry sits in that library chair, and his face is cut, and his eyes are wide as he watches Henry walk around with a somnambulant gait. A phone rings, a camera is destroyed, and the Mark has to figure out how to complete his con because Jean is nowhere to be found. The doctor friend is nowhere to be found. It's just Jerry and Henry. After going through Jerry's things, Henry finds a postcard, and on the front features a painting of two bucks, and on the back there's an inscription. This reminds me of the two white boys. Henry asks about the two white boys, and we know why. David set it up with some comedic dialogue before. Betty and Veronica. Same girl with a different wig? Perhaps. You get to choose. It's not just David's jokes that keep me chuckling during this film. Jonikit's fourth act performance gains a comedic element that keeps the doomed situation from becoming completely morose. Hinted at by the Adam Friedland-y pitched-up responses he gave in Act 1, Evan sprinkles in physical comedy as well as some great reactions, like when Jerry says, "I'm not feeling too well." And Evan looks at him with a sneer, puffs his cigarette, then responds, "No, of course not." Despite it all, Henry is still a good guy, and he gets some aspirin from Jerry's lunch pail, then gives it to him with a thermos to drink from. A favor? To get one in return. We circle back to the topic of the Betty and Veronica white boys so Henry can learn their fate, and this will allow him to choose if it will be his fate as well. While Jerry tells us about what became of the white boys, the sound design creaks, and Mamet uses a brilliant flourish, a reoccurring cutback to that blockaded door. When people critique this film, saying that they just filmed the play, they're not doing justice to Mamet's directorial choices. The thing is, they probably don't even notice them because the dialogue is that good. There's a camouflage of craft with this caliber acting in this caliber script. Their surroundings melt away. Maybe Lars was on to something with Dogville. As the sound design ramps up, Henry learns of the white boys' fate, that they were run off the road, then shot dead. But this isn't all he could potentially learn, as Jerry continues his monologue. George, Jerry's buddy who sent the postcard, would take Jerry out hunting. The thing is, Jerry wasn't much of a hunter. He feels like you can do most of the good parts of hunting without heading out into the woods. The lesson he offers up to Henry is that one of the most dangerous parts of the hunt is actually when you're dragging the spoils back. You try to carry that deer and you die of a heart attack. You think you're the king walking out of the forest, and then you end up rotting right next to your prey. From this mention of death, the monologue shifts and becomes about change and about age and about things disintegrating. And Evan, the younger man, sits there, barely listening, thinking that he's running things. Jerry sighs. Young idiots, come on. Degree in psychology. Well, let him run it. It's not hard to see David in that library chair when you're listening to this portion of the monologue. You're looking at a tired man, one whose only chance at survival is Jonikit, and he can't be sure if this younger man sees him as anything more than a pawn. When I heard Dominic deliver this monologue, it clicked for me how personal this film is for David. On Mike Rowe's The Way I Heard It, David got unusually personal and revealed, "I think I went a little bit nuts for the first couple years I got blacklisted." He continues, "Everything I believed in was wrong. All the people I thought believed in me tossed me to the wolves. I didn't know what the fuck was happening." In a comment that gets a big laugh in the studio, David declares, "Getting betrayed is one of the least enjoyable of human experiences." Not one to complain, or rather, one who complains too often but rarely about himself, David explains that after the blacklisting and betrayals, he immersed himself in books from Prager and Elder and Victor David Hansen and Tom Paine and Tom Sewell. This movie is about Henry Johnson, a man betrayed. And where does Henry end up in the end of the film? In the library, amongst the books. When Mamet lost his JFK movie, he was at the mercy of change, age, and a disintegrating industry. In this case, unlike Henry, his son-in-law listened. Eben Jonigett put together a plan to save David. "We got to get Captain back up. We got to get his spirits back up," Shia said was the rallying cry between him and Eben. The boys decided the way to get Captain back up was that they'd offer the idea of Henry Johnson becoming a movie. Maybe he'd bite. On Bad Friends, David recalled, "Shia and Evan came to me and they say, 'Let's do a movie.' And I say, 'No, we can't fucking do. What are you talking about? It takes forever and we have to go and talk to the assholes in the valley.'" Evan and Shia circumvented this by explaining that they were going to do it themselves. They were going to raise the money themselves. They prepped behind Dave's back, and it was a turnkey situation. "Like a lot of great things in my life, I got dragged into it kicking and screaming," only to conclude, "It changed my life." As Jerry continues to tell stories of men no longer here, the sound of the train returns, and I was surprised that in that moment, I genuinely believed that Shia was about to step back onto screen. That never happened, though. Gene is dead. Dramaturgically, this makes the most sense. As a filmgoer, though, it's the equivalent of your mistress's husband arriving while you're in the middle of getting blown. Just a couple more minutes and you would have been satisfied. Now you're just waiting for the violence with your dick in your hand. Lights burst on. Jerry looks like he's checking to make sure that it's not the bright light, the end. Eben gets up, walks to a light switch, flicks it off, then walks to the next light switch and flicks it off. Turning off lights is what Mr. Barnes did as his conversation with Henry progressed in Act 1, until it was lights out on Henry's freedom. Now Henry carries out this dark ritual, despite knowing what the dark brings. And in this darkness, something switches in Evan's portrayal of Henry. He's now looking directly at Jerry when he speaks. He begins to buy in. The monologue has ended in favor of a conversation. We hear a chopper above. We see its lights in the darkness. The conversation pauses just as it did when Jerry walked in during Act 3 and Gene begged for more time. The situation spirals, so Henry goes on the offensive, interrupting him, saying, "You want to talk so that they can get into the position? The shooters?" The phone rings. The prison sounds like a submarine. A walkie-talkie squawks, and Jerry decides to start the conversation again because he has to. Reminding Henry that he has absolutely no one in this world, Jerry theorizes that Gene conned Henry, and Henry admits that this is what he believes as well. Desperation hardens in Evan's eyes as he fixates on the door. Possibilities beyond that single point of entry arise. They'll flood the block with gas. There are many ways this could end, and only one of them carries any type of logic. Jerry offers a solution. The story will be that the demands were Gene's, and they were, and that he started shooting. He didn't, and that Henry never fired a shot. In fact, he saved Jerry. We'll see about that. Evan's acting in this moment is that of a starving man being offered a morsel of food. All this desperate man needs to do to receive this favor is to give one in return. He needs to hand over the gun for this plan to work. What should I do? Henry asks, and Jerry responds, do what you want. People generally do. This line arrives as the Betty to Jean's whatever we want, Veronica. A hungry man has got to eat, so Henry removes the clip, clears the chamber, then hands over the pearl-handled gun. Henry Johnson now only holds that clip full of tokens in his hands as he walks towards the door with Jerry. Then, no longer with the gun, walking with Jerry, Jean, you know what? I forgot what happens next. Luckily, you can easily find out. And all it will cost you is $10 on henryjohnsonmovie.com. Let me know if you enjoyed the ending, you mark. Thank you for listening to the T. James Reagan podcast episode on David Mamet and Shia LaBeouf's Road Out of Hell, a post-Empire review of their film, Henry Johnson. If you'd like to read one of my novels, you can find them on Amazon.com. I'd suggest starting with Empire Waste. If you'd like to read one of my plays, search Miss Julie 2020 on Amazon. It's my adaptation of August Strindberg's Miss Julie, set during the COVID pandemic. Next episode will be my 2025 in review. Thanks for listening.